I tried to run into oncoming traffic. I stopped myself not long before a car came and I kind of ran in some bushes. I know you think you look amazing. You look like you have a problem. Other people should not be burdened with the side effects of an unhealed person. The reality is, to be vulnerable helps it become real for people because they're not going to see themselves in the crown and title, whatever the facade is that people see online. I think we owe it to people to share the stories, to share the actual heart, because anyone can have a platform. It takes another person to have a program, to have a mission. You know, a lot of people are given so many lines about well, just be happy or just do some things that'll make you happy or whatever. I think a lot of people are scared to say they have trauma because they don't want to invalidate others that have had it worse. The reality is trauma is just something that's stuck with you. Mental health is not a destination, it's a journey. You have to wake up every day and choose healing. Purpose is the remedy for hopelessness. It's time to reinstill what your purpose is and why you're here and what you want to accomplish in life.
Welcome to Rosabel Unscripted, the podcast where authenticity meets real life stories. I'm your host, Rosabel Zohfeld, and in each episode, I dive into unscripted conversations about personal growth, life challenges, and the experiences that shaped us. From heart-to-heart chats with inspiring guests to raw moments of self-discovery, I am here to share stories that connect us all. Whether you're seeking motivation, healing, or simply a dose of real talk, you are in the right place. So get comfortable, tune in, and join me on this journey of transformation, empowerment, and meaningful conversations. This is Rosabel Unscripted. Hello, beautiful people. Welcome back to another episode of Rosabel Unscripted podcast, where we create space for real talk, healing journeys, and the raw truth behind becoming who you want to be or who you meant to be. Today's guest is someone who completely embodies transformation. She's a therapist, a mother, a teacher. She's a coach, mental health warrior. Oh, did I mention she is Mrs. Arkansas, USA Icon 2025. Welcome, Megan.
Yes, ma'am. Thank you so much.
I'm so happy to have the opportunity to get to know you, to get to know a little bit more about your story. But we're not here just to talk about titles, right? We're here to tell the truth. Isn't that right?
Yes. The title is just a giant microphone to tell the truth.
Which is beautiful, and we're thankful for it. Absolutely. Anytime that we have that opportunity to talk about that truth, a truth that starts with a very dark day, perhaps one that nearly ended your life. But why don't I let you tell us the story? Tell us a little bit about what happened.
Absolutely. So I grew up kind of perfectionist, type A, just, trying to be the golden kid. I want to do all the things right. And as I got older, I realized that was kind of leading to a lot of anxiety and a lot of negative thoughts. And as I became super active in pageantry, I developed an eating disorder, obviously of no fault of anyone's. It was just a decision I made that I was focused on the wrong thing. Instead of focusing on a journey, I was focused on an outcome. And one night I was out with some friends and my boyfriend at the time. I call it the dark day because it's a day that I only remember because it's a part of the transformation, not because I want to remember it. After we had gone out and we were coming home, it was pretty late and we had been drinking and I was on a medication that wasn't supposed to mix with alcohol, but I had not been told that. And so as we got back, I almost remember feeling like a euphoric high. I just kept saying oh my gosh, this is so much fun. I just want to stay up. I want to all stay up. And everybody's like, we're tired. We want to go home and go to bed. And I felt attacked. I felt very sad and confused as to why I was so excited and nobody else was. A lot of people were worried, but they were just like, you've been drinking. You need to sleep on the couch and just not. And I got so upset. My friend left. I was left with my boyfriend, who then decided right then and there to break up with me. And what I came to find out later is that I have borderline personality disorder, in which rejection is a very high trigger. So that moment set me off. I tried to run into oncoming traffic. I stopped myself not long before a car came and I kind of ran in some bushes. At some point, the cops were called by a neighbor. And that was kind of the start, I guess, of my healing journey, if you will.
Wow. Megan, you wear so many hats. I mean, you're a teacher, a therapist, a cheer coach, a wife, mom, title holder. Which one surprised you the most about who you become today?
Definitely a therapist. I always wanted to be a mom. That was always part of the plan. I went through various different career options before deciding to become a teacher. So that one, not really shock, but therapist, that was a surprise. because that's not a role I would have seen for myself. And it's actually not super common for people who have struggled quite at the level I have to decide to become a therapist because we tend to be people pleasers. So just not always super common. So I'm a little surprised that that's where I wound up, but I'm really happy
I also wanted to ask you, at what point did you realize that mental illness perhaps isn't a choice, but that healing actually can be that choice that we can make?
Yeah. So when I was in pageants, I think it was before the dark day, but it may have been after. I'm pretty sure it was before. I was competing at Miss Dallas, and I knew I probably wasn't super competitive to win. There were a lot of incredibly great competitors that year, and I had not done the proper preparation to be competitive. But I had been so active in my eating disorder, starving and throwing up and just doing all these things that I was like, well, for sure, I've got swimsuit, right? Nobody's going to take swimsuit from me. And when I didn't win swimsuit and I really didn't do super well at all, I went back to the dressing room, was packing up my stuff, and I was crying, just so downcast, so sad that that's like where we ended up. And this super sweet woman, I'll never forget it. She was one of the directors of a different pageant. She was kind of older woman, kind of like a mom. And she walked over and she gave me a hug and she was like, I know you think you look amazing. You look like you have a problem. And I was kind of offended at first. I went home and thought about it. And then I realized that's a hard thing to say to someone's face. You're jeopardizing a relationship to say that out loud. Because if someone is offended, they may not want to talk to you again. And so I could only surmise that had to come from a place of love. I was like, man, she must have felt really compelled to say something. I need to reflect. And the more I did, the more I realized that I was in a really dark place and I wasn't happy with where my life was. I needed something to change. And in order to really make that clear for myself, it was like, you don't go into a McDonald's and choose personality disorder, eating disorder, whatever it is. You don't choose those things, but it may not be something you chose, but it is your problem to deal with. As an adult, we owe it to ourselves to go and heal. Other people should not be burdened with the side effects of an unhealed person. That is my job. My job is to heal and then to see what I can do with that. So I'm very, very blessed that I made that choice. I put myself in treatment, took no one else to go sign me up. I signed myself up. I took a week off from work to go full time before I went down to part time. And then I ultimately ended up moving home with my parents to give it a few more months. I want to be a one and done. I want to go in and conquer it and get better and then move forward with life. And so I spent months in treatment facilities, and it was some of the best time I've ever spent. I met actually my best friend in my treatment facility, and I just learned more about myself. And so I think that ultimately I can give so much credit to how I became a therapist, because the therapist that helped me saved my life and I wouldn't be here without them. And so if I can be any fraction of that to another person, everything I've gone through is worth it, because I'm very open with my clients and I share with them, that I'm not just a person who's giving you everything I learned in grad school, right? Like, I've been there. I can actually feel it. I'm not just, oh, I'm so sorry you're going through that. Like, no, I know.
Right. No, absolutely. It's such a beautiful story. So, how do you balance that vulnerability with the visibility in such a public role?
Absolutely. When you think about competing and you think about different ways that you can be an advocate, I could be an advocate with or without a crown. That part isn't required. But the reality is, like, to be vulnerable helps it become real for people, because they're not going to see themselves in the crown and title if I present like, my makeup's always perfect and I've never had a problem and I'm beautiful, whatever the facade is that people see online. And so while, yeah, you're going to have those photos and you're going to have those things, I think we owe it to people to share the stories, to share like the actual heart, because anyone can have a platform. It takes another person to have a program, to have a mission. And that part has been the part I have taken super seriously in this role. I have developed a very strong program to help people get resources, free resources, for me to generate movies and videos about how to get help, about different tools that I know as a therapist. But not everyone can afford to see a therapist all the time. It's expensive. It's a very expensive thing. And so I find that I owe it to people to be vulnerable, and that helps me show up authentically. It helps me be honest with people, because I think my story matters. And I think if I had to go through all of that, I need it to matter. I need it to be for a reason. And I think it helps people, because a lot of my clients have come back to me and said, I know you get it. And that's the piece that just feels so nice.
And that's also part of what I feel my job is in here myself in a way to open up to a community, to normalize being human again and talk
Yeah.
about these things that hurts us, no matter how messy they look like. Because for a long time, I feel we have lived under this culture of, I call it very raw. I call it like the whole suck it until you make it. You know, you're a professional. You must look this way. You must act that way. And we forget that we are human, that we have our moments and we need to also learn how to, especially in us, like in my profession. Yeah, no idea how many times we are called to hold it together. What are we? Are we machines? We're also people.
Exactly.
So it's one of those things that I personally battle with, But I love, like you say, the way of showing my authentic self to
Mhm.
my patients because that way they don't look at me up here, as I
Yes.
hold all the cards or whatever. And I like to invite them, so, hey, let's do this together. Long gone are those days where it was like a physician center model. We have to take into consideration, I look at them and say, look, here's my recommendation. It's your body. Here's what I recommend now. It's your turn. Let's do this 50-50 thing. It's not
Yes.
just about me telling what you should do, and so on. So it is a beautiful work that we do. And also, another word that I hear a lot is called stigma, especially from where you sit as both
Yeah.
as a therapist and also as a survivor, someone who have lived through it. Tell us, what do we still get wrong about mental health, especially in our culture?
I think a lot of times we get wrong, not just that it's a choice. I do think people are starting to move away from that. I think there's still some people that are hung up on that part of it, but also that you're weak if you have to get help. A lot of people are given so many lines about like, well, just be happy or, just do some things that will make you happy or whatever. And they try to give you quick fixes without understanding, like, we don't wake up one day and just I went to bed and I was perfectly fine and woke up the next day clinically depressed. That doesn't happen. And so because it doesn't happen overnight, we don't get fixed overnight. We have to do the hard work. There's medication that can be helpful, but the sad part is if I'm not coping well, the medicine is a barrier to feeling it. And then eventually when life hits me, I won't know what to do with it because I already didn't. And so it's
Exactly.
therapy, it's learning the tools that actually help us process our traumas and go backwards. I think a lot of people are scared to say they have trauma because they don't want to invalidate others that have had it worse. The reality is, trauma is just something that stuck with you. It's something terrible that happened to you that stuck with you. And we owe it to ourselves as adults, especially, to process those traumas and to get through them so that we cannot repeat them. So many people
Absolutely.
use those things as excuses for behavior as opposed to a reason to overcome. We can choose to do something with it, and we owe it to ourselves to do it.
You are so right. And when it comes to medicine, those are tools to help us, but they are not supposed to be the cure for it. There's no cure for anxiety or depression per se.
Yeah.
Another tool. I always tell this to my patients, and we know this by research,
Yeah.
studies that show that psychotherapy alone won't do it. Medication alone won't do it. You combine
That's
both, you got a higher
sweet
chance,
spot.
right?
It's a sweet
And
spot.
now we have even more research when we do somatic therapies like breath
Yes.
work and yoga. I
Okay.
come back to it, and it's just such an amazing. And I am so enamored with Dr. I always forget to say his name, Bessel
Mhm.
Vanderkolk, the one who talks about the trauma, the body keeps a score, and so on. I'm inclined to think the brain also keeps score
It
because there's
does.
something, our brain, me in neurology, and trying to find this other ways. I mean, it's fascinating in a good way, not to be morbid about the whole situation, because yeah, who wants to talk about an ideal world, in a world of, let's call it Barbie world, trauma and depression and everything will be pink and flowing and
Sunshine and
beautiful.
rainbows and
Exactly.
unicorns. Yeah.
But
It's
it's
just
not reality.
Yeah, it's not
Exactly.
reality. And I think that's the hard part is that we get it wrong that the stigmas are more tied to the people getting help. And it's been normalized a little. Like my mom jokes when I became a therapist because she had never had a positive experience in therapy. She was like, it's so crazy because in my day, like you would be like, I'm going to therapy. She's like, you would whisper it. And it was this embarrassing thing
Yeah.
you didn't want to admit out loud because it meant something was wrong with you. And now people are like, oh my gosh, my therapist said, and they'll just say it. And there's not
Right.
stigma around therapy because perfectly everyday people are going just to vent. I have clients who have serious mental illnesses, and I have clients who I'm pretty sure are much better They just like
Mm.
having the appointment. They like knowing someone's there that's unbiased. And every time I'll approach it and say, do you feel like you're ready to move on? Like, we could terminate. And they were like, I like knowing the appointment's there.
Yeah,
And to me, at that point, I'm like, you hit management. You've hit a point where like your mental health is relatively healthy and you're just doing things that keep it there. And that should be everyone's goal. Mental health is not a destination, it's a journey. But, the best thing you can do is learn that, like, okay, I may not need therapy all the time. I may just take some medication or whatever is necessary. But if I felt myself slipping, I'd be the first one to pick up and find a therapist, the first one.
absolutely.
Most therapists
Yeah.
had a therapist.
Oh, yeah, for sure. I mean, it's necessary. Talking about the whole normalizing and things, yes, things are getting better. We still got quite some stuff to do. For example, especially in our current society, because I understand that other countries perhaps have actually established mental health days. We have to be honest. When we work, sometimes we have to say, "Oh, my kid has a fever." No, actually, I was not having a very good day. Whatever is the circumstance that we're going through at work. But the other question I have for you is, what is something that that one thing that you wish people knew about supporting someone who's struggling? Not necessarily with advice, but with like presence, because I get that question a lot.
Yeah. So, kind of what to do whenever you have someone in your life that's struggling.
Right, because let me just give you a little example, and this is something that came to me across social media. I think it was yesterday or today. Someone mentioned like they had a family member had a miscarriage or something. This person was like, "What do I do? What do I say?" And my first thought is like, you don't have to say anything. Just be there for her. Just be there and let her know that you're there, even if it means just listening. But it's still such a like, and we get that, especially when we go to funerals. So like, what do I say? Because we have that urge that something that we always have
Yeah.
to say something. But
100%. I think for sure it is about being there for people because I mean most people are not trained professionals. The problem is that's what increases suicide rates because most people, and I won't say everyone, but most people who actually are talking about suicide have no desire or intent to complete or do it. They are truly trying to show you how desperate they feel, how alone they feel, and it's a cry for help. And if you don't notice it, that feeling grows and it becomes a problem. That's why it's important when we have people in our lives to notice them, because most people aren't looking for you to say, oh, it's going to be okay. Because what if it doesn't feel like it will? That's invalidating. That doesn't feel good. So it's really about being in that moment and being like, I don't know what you need right now. And I can't begin to understand what you're going through, but I'm here in it with you. I describe it to my patients, especially with depression, as like if you imagine like a pothole in the road and you have fallen down in that pothole and you're like, I don't know how to get out of this hole. Do you want someone to walk past the hole and be like, I'm so sorry you're down there? That's awful. Or do you want someone to like reach down and try to help pull you out or throw you some tools or maybe even get in the hole with you and just sit in it with you? But the reality is you're so much more likely to get out of that hole with another person or with a team of people. The problem is people just walk on by and they're like, so sorry. And that's so not okay. We have to notice people. We have to do better. And that's the area where I think mental health will grow in recognition in our country and in our society whenever people take notice of how bad it gets. Teachers,
right,
especially, you would not believe. I don't have a teacher friend without anxiety, depression, or something. We are all struggling. It's a national teacher shortage at this point. And nobody notices, nobody says, I did work in one district that gave you one wellness day and they did not make you tell them at all why you took it. And that was so nice. But I'm like, that's one district. I have worked in 7. Why don't we do that? Why doesn't any job give you a handful of days throughout the year where it's like, you don't owe me an explanation and they'll call it sick days. But I'm like, well, we actually get sick too. So there's the days you can't show up and there's the days that you show up anyways and you shouldn't.
think about doctors and nurses.
Mhm. I
The
can't even
statistics
fathom.
are staggering about suicide among
Mhm.
doctors and nurses because they suffer alone. And because again, they
Yeah.
have to keep that they're supposed to be the healers, they're supposed to be the
Mhm.
ones who know everything. They
Yeah.
have the life all figured out. But most people, we forget that they're also moms, their daughters. They got even family members with illnesses, chronic illnesses. There's so many things that go on top of the load that we have to. go through. It's a job.
I
And I
can
also wanted to mention something quite interesting. Perhaps that happened to me. I've shared that before. Some of the people say, let's say someone's going through a depression or sometimes we go and it's like, yeah, I'm feeling this way or however. And they said, but why? I have no reasons to be sad.
oh my
That
goodness.
whole
Yeah.
idea, I've heard that before. Like
I have
you
heard
get
that so much. You have
you have
everything going
everything
for
going
you.
on for you.
Yeah.
Exactly.
That
You're
that
the
is
queen. I mean,
yes,
you
that's my biggest peeve. Like
exactly.
if nothing else, that part is just to say someone has to have a reason is to say you chose it, right? Because it's like, oh, well, just make your circumstances better and you'll feel better. Like most depressed people actually have no idea why they're sad. They can tell you, like, I can't give you a reason. Why? Because they wouldn't choose to feel that way. Who would? What a depressing
Exactly.
life. What a sad life. Like, but they do. People make those comments like, I can only imagine doctors, dentists have one of the highest rates of anybody. And I'm like, well, I wonder why, because they make all this money and then everybody thinks, well, you have money. Your life must be great, or even in other helping professions, nurses and teachers who don't get paid as much, but it's like, oh, but you're helping people. That should feel good and be enough. And you're like, cool, I get screamed at all the time for things that aren't my fault. It feels great. It's out by children, it's
Yes.
wonderful. And people forget that it's taxing. It's taxing on your mental
Yes.
health. And as a doctor, you're also dealing with the empathy of like, I want to help, but I have to be professional, but I also am sad because you carry some of that with you. I know because I do in therapy, like that goes with you. That's hard. And people are so invalidating in their words.
Absolutely. But that goes to that point that you mentioned, and I never thought about this, like somebody getting in the hole with you. You know what it would mean for me for someone to get in the hole with you is to probably not even say that. I may not understand what you're going through, but it's also to understand that it's part of nature to kind of like
Put yourself
when
there.
you have a wound, right? You have a wound, you gotta let it heal. It
Yes.
has to get ugly for a little
It
bit
does.
until it gets better, right? You cannot just pretend, it's like, under the rug and don't think about it. Oh, let's go
No.
watch a movie. It works that way. Sometimes we gotta let the tears go
Yes,
because they actually help us heal.
they
So
do.
to me, getting in that hole with them, it means that, you know what? Do you need to get a cry? Let's cry together.
Yeah.
I may not feel what you feel, but
Yeah.
I'm here right next to
I'm
you.
here. And that's where I'm like, it's such I think I came up with it one of my first years. And I was just like, that's the visual I see. It's just that like, we're all just wanting someone to like, and it doesn't mean I want you to like, I'm miserable, so I want you to be miserable with
Right.
me. It means I just want you, I want to feel like you get it, and that's why therapy works. And people are apprehensive for it because it has a stigma to it of like, well, why should I need to pay someone to tell them my problems? That's a huge barrier in therapy is that everyone's like, well, I have friends, so I shouldn't need a therapist. One, your friends aren't trained. And two, even if that weren't the case, your friends are not legally obligated to make it about you. The second your friend doesn't want to say the right thing, they could be like, oh my gosh, I went through the same thing. And now they're talking about them. It's not about you anymore. What if you're the one really hurting? That hurts. As a therapist, we don't do that. We're just listening. And I think that's what we're all craving. And we've grown to a point where it's funny to me. We validate it in marriage all the time or in relationships. We're like, oh my goodness, if he would just listen instead of trying to fix my problems, everything would be great.
Mm.
Why can't that same thing apply in mental health? Why can't we understand that people aren't always looking for a fix? Because we probably half the time do know what we could do. Right? Like I could purposely do the things I would enjoy, whether I'm sad or not sad. I could get up and take care of myself and take a shower if I don't feel like it. I could do all those things, but I can't give myself the condolence that someone else can offer me. And that's the piece I think we're all missing. It's just you want someone in that hole. Come down with me, be with me until I can figure out my way out of it, or you can bring stuff with you. The person up at top has a lot more ability to bring down a ladder.
And it takes acceptance and the part of the other, and even ourselves to accept the fact that we're going through a hard time. Sometimes it's not easy.
No.
And much more to disclose that.
Especially the guilt that goes with that. I think because of that, like you said earlier about, well, you have it all together. You shouldn't be sad. Why are you sad? That makes it so much more vulnerable to say, but I don't feel okay, because then people are like, but why? But why? And it's like, well, what if I can't give you a why?
Exactly.
And that's going to stop anybody. If I can't answer why, I'm not going to tell you anything.
if we can get something out of this conversation is that idea to how to, because again, that is the question, like, how do I help other people?
Mm.
When they're, what do I say? By being there, let them be. As long as, of course, they're not actively suicidal and
Sure.
it's something that
And
will harm them.
there's even
Yeah.
there's a certification that any person can get, and it's usually free. It takes 1 day. It's called the QPR, and it gives people the ability to recognize suicidality and to help someone get help. It doesn't teach you to be a therapist. You're not a therapist, but there are so many things out there like that that anybody could get if they care enough about people to love on
Mhm.
people in that way. And I think that's the part that we're missing is it's easier not to notice because we're all like, well, everybody's going through something. It's like, yeah, but not everybody hurts like that, and the stats are going up is the sad part. So if we don't do something, we're gonna,
On my podcast, I had a couple. They're actually friends, and they both went to suicidal ideation, actually survivors of suicidal attempt. And I learned something through them that I did not know, that as a, for example, I am also a victim of suicide. And I don't know if you knew this because apparently my mother committed suicide. And so for the longest time, I realized that I was a survivor of it because I mean, again, my mom is not longer here, but I live with that, with whether it's the stigma. This was at the end, it was in 1999. I was in Colombia, South America. One of the things that struck me about that particular story that I will tell you is the fact that I did not learn what had possibly occurred until later because my own family was covering. And not because they did not want other people, because very Catholic, what are other people going to think? Because
yeah,
I don't know, still today, there is, I don't know if that's still a belief, but according to the Catholic Church, it's a sin. Oh, well, yeah. But again, I didn't realize it until I actually came to America and I was in a class. I'll tell you the story real quick because it always like amazed me the fact that I went to Catholic school, right? And they're completely like just females, nuns, and the whole thing, right? And the nuns, they came in and they asked, so what did she die from? And then somebody said, well, apparently she committed suicide. They have not heard the word suicide with those women turn around and literally just left. And I kid you not, I have not seen them until this day. Like at that point, I was like, I did not understand like what happened. But later, many years later, like 10 years later, I was actually reading, I think it was Hamlet. I was in a literature class. And that part where I think it was Ophelia, right? That she kills herself, right? Or drowns herself. And then there's a chapter or something or a part where the Catholic Church denied her the right to be buried on the sacred place or something
yeah.
because of what she had done. And I was like, oh my God, is that what happened? But I was 17, so then maybe 26 at the time. So I'm thinking, is that? And it just went into my mind like it's rejection. It's the weirdest stuff. It just amazed me because of the stigma.
It is. And it all,
And
I mean, sadly, and I know there's cultural ties, there's religious ties, there's all kinds of ways that people can see it through their own lens. But the reality is, like, most people don't want to do that. They're hurting so bad. It's the same thing with people who self harm. I work with a lot of teenagers between school and therapy, and a lot of people self harm. And one of the things you hear from parents it's just like, well, I don't get why they would ever do that because you've never had that urge. You can't get it, but you're not supposed to. You just have to know your child is hurting so badly, they don't know another way. And the reality is, you can only, and I didn't know this until I became a therapist, you can only feel one kind of pain at a time. Fun fact.
right.
So if you are emotionally hurting to the point that you're like heaving, crying, and like going crazy, the urge to create physical pain is so that the emotional snaps out because you'll be focused on the new pain. That's all you can do. Your body will automatically do that. And if it doesn't, you will numb out. So you will either numb or you will be able to focus on a different pain, which is why people are driven to do that. Just like alcoholics or drug people, people are driven there from an emotional place of, I don't know what else to do. And that's where it takes that serious, like, internal reflection, desire for healing. Like, you do have to choose healing. You have to wake up every day and choose healing. We can drag a horse to water. We can't make them drink it. I could teach everybody everything I know, but I can't make you implement it. And I for sure can't make people take it seriously. The amount of times you tell someone like, I need you to focus on breathing. And they're like, they're like, I promise. Like, I promise if you really took it seriously, like I do it in my everyday life. I'm telling you it works. I'm telling you it works. You just have to like laugh at yourself, say, I know I feel ridiculous, but
Take a deep breath. Exactly. Wow. It's so amazing the things that we learn, but life is such a big, big school in so many ways. I also tell the story with him the same thing. I mean, you learn so much. And me and my particular story also, a few months later, my mom passed away. My family took me to a therapist, right? And one of the first things this therapist says to me, that's the only thing honestly I remember. She said, well, we're really concerned about you because, statistics show that you might do what your mom did. That's basically what she told me. And I was like, oh, she didn't. Yes. Yes. And I was
that,
deeply offended.
well, I would hope so. I'm like, I don't know how you could not be that. I can't.
I just remember telling that woman, what makes you think I am my mother?
Yeah.
I was just telling a friend, and that becomes something for a 17-year-old, newly 17. I just turned 17. It was like, and it went into the back of my psyche, literally thinking like I have to
Yeah.
fight to not be here, to never be put in that category, even
Well,
as much as I love.
she planted a really terrible seed. Like I cannot imagine. And a lot of people are afraid of like, if I ask someone if they're thinking about hurting themselves, does that convince them to do it? I've had that question a lot of times. Like, so if I call someone on it and say, are you thinking about killing yourself? Does that then encourage them to do it? No, absolutely not. In fact, if anything, it like brings a lot to light because
Mhm.
someone's going to lie about it. They're going to lie about it. There's nothing you can do. But if someone wants to talk, that's their opening, you know? And so you
Exactly.
have to be comfortable asking the hard questions, but you would also like planting the idea is more like that, you know, like, well, it's highly likely you would, or like, hey, you're super depressed. I could see a world where it's like, and I know so many people that have had bad experiences with therapists. I'm usually most people's second or third therapist. I'm rarely the first because I would say like too many people, they try it and I jokingly, and I have so many therapist friends, so I throw no shade at them, but I call them the head nodders. They just kind of nod their head and they're like, how does that feel? And, what was that like
Yeah.
for you? And it gets you somewhere for a month or two, and then after a while, you're kinda like, "Bro, what are we doing here?" And I am
Yes.
the opposite in my approach to clients. I am direct. I confront,
Hmm.
I ask the hard things, I occasionally give advice if I think it's helpful. It's not most people's approach, and the clients I have, I tell them that on session 1, and I'm like, "If that is not it, I am so okay with that. Please go find someone that can help you in the right way." But for some of my people, they can't imagine it any other way because the other style wouldn't work for them. But a lot of
Absolutely.
people
Yeah.
get burned in therapy and psychiatry and doctors, that, well, I had this one bad one and they must all be like that. And it's like,
Yes.
oh, but you have a choice.
I do have a curiosity, and this is something I don't know if you ever heard of. I think she's a neuroscientist. Her name is Caroline Leaf. I don't know if you've heard of her. One of the recent things, she was actually on the Mel Robbins podcast. I listened to her. She was talking about basically how somebody with depression, you are not depression. You are not anxiety. Anxiety, depression is not an it. It's not a thing. It's a little bit different, when you talk in the medical community about, for example, you have liver disease, therefore, okay, we can do something, what will fix it. It's not a thing that we could just like, here's a pill, goes away. And you even said it, trauma. I
Yep.
mean, let's be real. It doesn't go
Everyone
away.
has
If
it.
you Exactly.
Yeah.
I even thought about that. We all have trauma. The whole idea of when we're born, trauma
There.
for the baby, trauma for the
Yep.
mama. I mean, however that registers in our body, in our cells, you name it. It's a very interesting concept.
It is so true because a lot of people, my mom used to tell me her worst fear in therapy was that like everybody's just going to go back to your childhood and just talk about your parents and everything's the parents' fault or whatever. No one walks out of childhood unscathed because our parents aren't perfect people. It has nothing to
Right.
do with you could have had a great childhood, loving parents, all the things, but there is still something that just didn't jive with your personality or maybe made you a little bit more self-conscious or whatever. Innocent comments meant well intended can be turned into something completely different by a child's mind. And that's where so often like the healing comes from us like learning to give ourselves the needs that we so often seek in other places. Like how do I give myself self-esteem and not seek it out from other people? How do I decide what I want and quit seeking the approval of others through people pleasing? We learn to give ourselves those things because maybe somewhere in childhood we missed that step. We didn't hit that, or our parents weren't able to, so we didn't see it modeled. Our parents can say all the right things, but I remember a lot of times thinking like, if your parent can't show you though, it's just words. So it's like we're looking at modeling, we're looking at all of that. And that's why a lot of times you do have to go backwards because you got to go heal what's still there. But if you don't have to, then we deal with what you're currently in. And it's the stigma you have to get past of like, I want to get better more than I care how people will see it.
Absolutely. How would you say you guide some people to move from the I am broken to I am becoming?
I think it's just seeing that you have to have hope. That is such a big piece. One of the ways I like to advocate within my program, I call it Hope for Mental Health, and it's an acronym. The H is help, the O is optimism, the P is purpose, and the E is power. Without purpose, we are all kind of lost. One of the questions we ask people who are depressed is like, do you ever feel hopeless? There's just nothing can get better. That is a key sign of depression. Purpose is the remedy for hopelessness, right? If I believe that even if I'm sad right now, there's a reason I'm here and I have a purpose and something I'm supposed to exist for, then this feels temporary. This may suck right now while I'm in it, but I know there's another side and I know I'm going to get through that. So I think it's looking at people and finding out, do they have a purpose yet? And if not, that's step one. Like, let's get you help. You need your social circle. You might need professionals. And then let's find a way to get you a purpose because then we can tackle optimism. We can empower you. We can do all these other things. But without a purpose, people do fall through the cracks because it's something you can't generate for someone. I can't tell you why you're here, but I can help you get there, right? I can help you figure it out. And once you know why you're here, hopefully that will get you through those harder days. So I think we feel less broken when we know what the end goal is. I know a huge part of mine was the day I realized I wanted to be a therapist. And I was in my journey. I started grad school still deep in like treatment centers. I was going to class at night, learning how to be a therapist, and in the day, seeing therapists from 9 a.m. to 6 p.m. And I had never felt so understood and so heard. And I know not everyone's experience in therapy is that way, but it was for me. And so the clients I have, that's my goal, is to create a space like that. And now with the title, I'm able to do that for free to many more people. I maybe can't provide a
Beautiful.
clinical service, but I can provide resources. I can provide
Yeah.
tips. I can make videos. I create PDFs of journaling prompts and different things like that just to give people something to start with, and
Absolutely.
hopefully that sparks that hope.
And in my case, I'm not a mental health professional. I'm a nurse practitioner. I happen to work in a sister field, we'll call it that way, neurology and so on. But I hope that from my learned experiences, one of the things I could say with lots of confidence is asking for help is the beginning of so much that you can do for yourself because keeping things inside, battling and being afraid to just like somebody, kind of like you knock on the door, right? It doesn't open, go to the next one because,
Yes.
it's about, again, sharing. You begin to unload, or I don't know if the word is unload or offload whatever is
Yeah.
going on in your life. And for me, it has been helpful. I'm not shy of talking to working through things because that right there is just getting it off my chest. And whether it means writing it down, journaling has been my companion.
Yes.
Whatever it is, there's always resources available out there. If you don't have a friend, you can write things down. Anything that you can do to be kind to yourself, let's put it that way.
That is so true. And the more you do it, the more you see the benefits. I think that's the hard part is the first time people go see a psychiatrist, get on a medicine, see the therapist, it's like, well, I didn't notice anything. And I'm like, you're not going from 10 to 0. you're looking to decrease, right? So it's like if I try a coping skill, I'm not trying to get from 10 to 0. I'm trying to get a 10 down to a 7 where I can handle stuff. At 7, I can make some wise decisions. At 10, so it's like you're looking to be realistic. How do you manage? Like you said, journaling is, oh, it's so powerful. And people who haven't tried it can't understand because the first time you might feel silly. First few times you may feel silly, but eventually it just becomes like a processing,
It
something
is so much
switches.
that I can't even notice when I don't write things down. I'm like, I haven't written today.
My understanding is that it switches you from like cognitive functioning to sensory. And when you're sensory, you use a different part of the brain. And that's why they actually say like old school note taking, like we used to do in school, is so much better than this. I didn't really have to process it. I heard it and dictate it. Right. But if I have to do this, I'm thinking about the words because I have to craft the letter.
I remember in my days of working in the ER, in a very, very busy ER, having this conversation there, the med room, right? A very small hospital. And we knew all the nurses will I noticed there was one particular nurse, every time she'll go in there, she'd do her little cry. And so one day I told her, like, I got my little piece of paper because she's like, what do you do? And like, I mean, she knew I was upset about something. And so I like, let me tell you my secret. I actually go in that corner. So instead of going to the med room to kind of cry, let me show you what I did. And I just started writing the next answer in the corner, like writing things down.
Yeah.
It
It does. And those are the things that are accessible all the time. I'm a big proponent of fidgets. I try to convince all my clients to have a fidget in their purse. I'm just like, you would be amazed at the fact that you can pay better attention. You can channel stress into it. You can do so many things. They were invented for that purpose. It's just funny.
I wish
everybody
I could
thinks
show
they're
you something because I always keep a journal. I've kept so many of them, but I do what I call hieroglyphics, so not even writing. So I'm thinking, but because I'm thinking so fast, so my mind is just like, I'm just doing this.
Yep.
Nobody will ever know, not even me, know what's in there.
No.
But the mind, exactly. And the mind interprets it that you are putting into the paper, and it's gone.
And that's really all it is. And people can do that with anything. You can do it with exercise. It's that channeling the feeling into something. That's why it's like my least favorite question as a therapist is like, can you give me some coping skills? And I'm like, I can teach you a few things, but coping skills are true to the person because one person music is healing for, another person journaling, another person art. Like you have to try the things that make you happy and use it. Put all of that feeling and emotion in it. So instead of just doing it to make you happy, you do it even when you're upset. And that's the hardest part, I think, is like when people say, oh, well, I don't want to exercise because I don't have motivation. Well, most people don't. We just choose it anyway. You have to treat it like vegetables. Eat it anyways. And self-care works that way.
Oh my God, I've gone to yoga I'm so tired. I'm here. And then what I like about it, I went like that, like I was so exhausted and I got out there. It's like, oh, this is so worth it.
I'm like, have you ever regretted a workout?
Oh, no. No.
You can always tell people that is like, self-care is not something you regret. You don't look back at it just like a workout. I'm like, I've never finished a workout and been like, well, that was a total waste of time. No. You finish and you're on endorphins. You're like, I'm proud of myself. I'm strong. I'm this. And you're feeling all your feels. Self-care works the same way. I'm like, who is sad after a bubble bath? Do the things for yourself and you'll find that really it's taking care of yourself. That's what keeps mental health like sustainable, is like choosing yourself, not everybody else. Why do they tell you to put your oxygen mask on first? Because that's necessary. If you don't pour into you first, you cannot give. And there are so many helping professions in today's world, arguably professions you don't even think are helping professions. Hairstylists, they have become pseudo therapists. Everybody and their mom that gets
touch, touch.
You're like, think about that. They don't even like, they're in it to give a service and they're sitting listening to people. We're all hearing everybody's sadness. And that's fine. We need to, but we have to take care of us first to be able to handle hearing that. I've heard some of the saddest things in humanity, things that still, like, I swear sometimes I feel like I'm just listening to Lifetime movies, like the saddest stories. And that's heavy. And doctors have it all the time because they're not just hearing the stories, they're seeing it lived out. And that goes with you. So it's like, in order to carry that, I also have to be really, really okay. Otherwise, I'm of no use because everything I say is just verbiage.
That is
It's not something
exactly
from the
true.
heart.
In my case, for example, part of what I do is I deal with a lot of dementia patients and patients that have lost their
Ooh,
cognitive abilities. But the way I look at it, I'm not only dealing with the patient, I'm also with their families. I listen to the stories. There is the patient what's going through. They're sitting in this chair, and then there's the caregiver who's like, yeah, and this and this and that. And suddenly I pause, I look at them in the corner of my eye, I look at them and said, how are you doing? And they look at me like, you talking to me? Yeah, you. I know you're not the patient, but you're very much attached to this case.
so
You
true.
know, about caregiver stranding, the importance of them to be, I tell them, you need to be healthy for you and for
Yep.
the person you're taking care of. It is a part of my job. I took it a part of me because
I
you
love
know how
that.
it is, you know, and that extra mile and whatever, but I make it part of the whole holistic approach, not
Well,
just the whole body, but the family,
yeah,
social part
I
of it.
can say I know for a fact that you're making a difference with that. My father passed away 7 years ago. One of his diagnoses was dementia. My mom was a caretaker for 5 years. And I
Mhm.
remember not long after he died, she dropped like 30 pounds of just sick weight. She had been exhausted for 5 years taking care of someone, and she's not really great at self care. She puts everybody else in front of herself, which is a great mom, but also not good for you. And it took her forever to learn like there's a balance and like maybe shedding some of that, but also just being healthy and learning what that life looks like. And I love that you recognize that like the family members are struggling too. I think she had a lot of misunderstanding in that would have meant the world to her to have someone just see it and say, I know it's hard for
Mm.
you too.
It's
It's
not an easy, it's not easy for the patient. It's not easy for the
no.
family members.
Uh,
It's not easy for anybody. And unfortunately, I mean, I don't know about the whole nation, but I know in Texas, I mean, unfortunately, we don't have all the resources we wish we'll have for those. They depend a lot on their primary care
yeah.
physicians because not everybody wants to work with dementia patients, you know?
Oh
And I
gosh.
see so many sad stories. The saddest part to me is when they try to, I mean, and oh, well, you're 86. What does that mean?
Yeah, they're not done.
You know?
What
I'm
is
like,
what
what does it
thing to
mean?
say about a person? Well, I mean, you're there, so like
Oh, it's the
that's so
reality of
sad. My dad died at I want to say he was mid 60s. Definitely not one of those that you just look at and say, "Well, you've had a great life." Like 63, my son was about to turn 1. And so he never
yeah.
met my daughter, things like that, and I just look at that and think how absent-minded we can be because it's not just dementia, there's Alzheimer's, there's all the different conditions
There's
like
all
that.
kind there's so much, and there's so many conditions out there that also mimic dementia. And one of the things
Yep.
I'm very careful about, okay, where do we get this diagnosis? Oh, well, because she's 96. Okay, let's take a look at this.
Yep.
Let's make sure that this is actually, are we sure
Mhm.
there's not something else going on? There's so many things, different medications, acute infections. Until I don't feel comfortable moving with I get it. I mean, I get that you're almost 100, but that just
Sure,
because of
that
that doesn't give you
no.
earned you I've seen yeah, no, no.
And that's
So,
the best thing you can do. Like, one of the reasons I had my dark day was I was put on a medication for bipolar. I'm not bipolar. And they thought I had it, misdiagnosed, didn't explore it. It was a psychiatrist that didn't ask enough questions. He didn't dive. And the psychiatrist that found my borderline, oh my gosh, I'll never forget because they presented it as an option like, we think you actually have this. And I had no idea what it was. I had never heard of it before. So I just assumed it meant multiple personalities. And I got super angry. I was like, how dare you, you awful people. I'm here for an eating disorder. What is wrong with you? And then I went home and researched because it was therapist in training. So it was like, I need to know what they're saying. And I felt more seen. TikTok was not a thing then, but if it had been, because I joke with my clients whenever they hear a diagnosis and they're like, I don't know if I have that. I'm like, get to the borderline side of TikTok and find out. Because if you feel seen when you hear other people talk about it or you read those diagnosis criteria, suddenly your world makes sense. It is a whole lot easier to heal something you understand. Healing something generic, that's why diagnoses are necessary. But then what a lot of people don't know, and you would know this in the medical profession, I know it as a therapist, like insurance is a poo head. insurance is requiring you to diagnose within an hour of meeting someone just in order to get paid. And that's not enough time. Most of the time, not enough time. You can guess, but you may be making an educated guess based off of the requirement and then later having to go back and say, upon further reflection, I actually believe this is accurate. And that's what's so terrible about the way the system works is like, it's not, mental health care needs to start being allowed to be preventative care. We shouldn't be waiting until we have a diagnosis to go to therapy. If we feel like we're sliding and we maybe aren't diagnosable yet, why can't we still get paid for care? That's the piece that's frustrating.
There's so much. I also work on advocating, teaching patients. And sometimes, again, if you have a patient with dementia or cognitive decline, they're probably, they're not going to be all there to understand but the whole advocate. I like to teach the families like, okay, did you see this? Oh, well, we never thought about it. So educating them on the questions to ask other providers, okay, when you go back to your PCP, what about this? What about all those things? I was like, oh, we never thought about that. So, well, that's my job. I'm an educator. Yes. And when you got here I'll joke with them and tell them, I got some homework for you.
I do that all the time. And that's where, I laugh and say, like, none of it is even, it's not political. It's not even opinion. It's strictly just the idea that, like, we're all entitled to be our best selves. We're all entitled to feel healthy and to live as well a life as we can. And that just means that, I tell people, because they'll be like, I've never had a therapist dive this much into my diagnosis. We've never talked about it that much. And I'm like, well, that's kind of sad because there's a chance that it would give you some peace. There's nothing more invalidating than if you've had flu symptoms or a cold or something, and then you go to the doctor, they check your ears, check your throat, check your temperature, everything. And then they're like, it's just a little bug. You just need to go home and rest. And you're like, bro, because you want something to be wrong to explain the symptoms. You're like, I want to know there's a reason I feel like this. And mental health works the same way. A diagnosis can be upsetting, but it can be freeing if you're open to it. If you truly are like, well, cool, now I know what I have. That means I can treat it. And now it's like,
knowledge is power.
Because I have borderline. What does that mean? So what do I need to work on? If that's what I have, I need to work on feeling accepted regardless of rejection. I need to work on how to handle rejection. If I have an eating disorder, I need to work on self-image and understanding that food is medicine, not just, a tool to weight. There's so many different things like that. And that's where it's so important to get perspective and to get help, whatever condition people have. That's the stigma part that I don't know when we'll stop fighting that battle of just like, it's okay to get help. Some people are so okay with it. And then there's so many that whether culturally, their family, their whoever, it's like, oh, well, you should just be okay. Or you should just, choose to get better. You've got friends or your life is fine. If you would just let people get help. Just let them get the help they need.
And let me ask this for the listener who might be feeling or sitting in, you call it their own dark day. Yeah, it is. I think I've spoken about this. I had postpartum depression and it feels like that. It's like a black thing. It's not even a cloud because I don't think it's up here. You feel like it's just closing down.
Suffocating.
Exactly. It truly hurts. You feel pain. You don't know how to, for me, you feel like something's just constricting you.
You could never tell anybody why because you're just like, oh, but you just had a baby. They're beautiful. Wasn't it worth it? And you're like, I don't know why I'm sad.
I'm just like, I wish I could explain, right? And sometimes people just gotta just listen, So what about somebody who's going through that dark day, that dark hour right now? What would you want them to know?
First and foremost, that they're not alone, that everybody in their life has had, will have, as long as you are still taking in air, there will be a dark day. Something will happen that rattles you and that puts you somewhere. And how you handle that is who you are. If you handle that super well, that's amazing. Yay for you. If you don't, and it's your dark day and you can't get out of the dark day, then it's time to get perspective. It's time to ask for help. It's time to reinstill what your purpose is and why you're here and what you want to accomplish in life. One of the things we did in treatment that I've encouraged now moving forward is something I teach people too, is like, come up with 3 reasons to get better. 3 things you want in life that could be prohibited if you didn't get better. So for example, I thought I was healing the eating disorder. Turns out it was more borderline than eating disorder, but that's separate. And I was like, well, I know I want to be a mom and eating disorders can kill your fertility. And that's reason to get better. I know I want to help people one day. and I can't be a hypocrite. So that's a reason to get better. I want to have social life and friends and a husband, and I don't want to scare people and be off-putting. That's a reason to get better. And when you sit and really think about what would happen, what better life is on the other side of this, that is a why. So on the hard days when it's like, I don't want to eat today because that's super hard and I'm upset and emotional and I didn't feel pretty in the mirror today. Okay, I pull out the card and I say like, okay, I'm going to eat, right? I'm going to choose to eat. Or I'm going to, depression. It's so sad because people will be like, I can't even bring myself to shower. And you're like, I'm going to shower anyway. And it's those little things. So I would tell people like, take those first steps, analyze your situation. Is there a good way you can handle it, or is it going to be a dark day? And if so, how do we pivot? How do you take the dark day and make it worth it? Because everybody's going to have one. As long as you have air, you're going to have one. It's coming. So gear up. I don't know anyone who hasn't had one. It's just we all handle it differently. And especially if you're walking around with mental illness, whether you're aware or not aware, and a lot of people aren't aware they have one. The statistics is like, almost half of people are walking around with something diagnosable. And to that point, if you're not aware, then it's time to reflect and say, does this feel like an appropriate response to the situation? That's always my question. It's like, am I reacting appropriately to the situation, or is my reaction off? Later, do you look back and think like, man, I blew up for nothing, or I did this or whatever. And if you feel rational, then you're managing okay. If you question yourself and think, man, why do I do that all the time? It's time to figure out why you do it. It's time to get the help and to analyze your patterns and to work on yourself. It's some of the most rewarding work you can do to understand yourself forwards and backwards, because when you do, self-care gets so easy. It is so easy to care for yourself when you know yourself that well.
Yes. And when we care for ourselves, we're not only caring for ourselves, we're also caring for the ones that we love. For
I wish
our
everyone
kids, for our
got that.
families.
Yeah. If everyone could understand that, it's like you're actually doing everyone a favor, because a happier you is a lot more fun for them.
Yeah, make a favor to society in general. For everybody, right?
I might smile at you as I pass. Hey,
Exactly.
just the way it should be. We're just conditioned that you have to wait till it's bad. And that's the worst part. I remember my initial specialty was eating disorders. And I remember thinking so many people wait until they're at feeding tube status. You need a feeding tube to go get help. I'm like, they needed help long before that. Long before that. And at that point, it gets harder and harder to treat. I was in treatment I think I was about 22, 23 with a 16-year-old girl. And she was one of the most inspiring people. She would tell us all, you've got this, you can do it, in group sessions. A couple years later, when I had moved and didn't live in the area anymore, I saw on Facebook that she had passed away. Her parents started like a scholarship fund for other people to get treatment. And they said they had found one of her journals where she had wrote, I feel like I could help everyone if only I could help me. And it was like, oh, that hurts, because she was a beautiful soul. And I'm like, that's what happens when we have to wait so long, when we can't just get help. I'm like, I would encourage anybody, like when you just start to feel like something's not right, see somebody. One therapy appointment is worth the check-in. If they can come back and say, I don't know, you seem fine to me. And, there you go. No harm, no foul. But if you think something's off, like you owe it to yourself. The better life is on the other side.
Wow, that is such a beautiful advice right there. Thank you so much, Megan. Is there anything I have not asked you that you want to mention?
I love sharing my story. I love hearing other people's stories, and then just teaching people how to get some help if they need it. I have all my resources on my Instagram, USA Icon Mrs. Arkansas. And then in 2 weeks, we'll know if I have a national title. And if so, hopefully magnify that. I have a lot of goals for if I win. There are a lot of free resources on there. I do what's called Mental Reset Monday. On Mondays, I provide either a resource or a video every single Monday to help people. So that's available there as well for free.
Wow. Congratulations. I wish you the best positive energy to you. I'm pretty sure you work pretty hard to do all the things that you do. So again, thank you so much for your courage. It takes a lot of courage to come and talk about all this. I talk a lot about the courage to be yourself and to put yourself out there so others can do the same and start getting those things out for the truth, and for being the kind voice that reminds us that we're never as alone as we think.
So true. And
that alone.
That's the best part. And I think podcasts like yours, most of the ones I've been on this year have been similar in their mission. And I love that there are so many people out there that are pushing authenticity and being your real self. And I think that's so important. The more people can hear those stories, the better. I think it helps people feel less alone.
It helps us to know that it's not just me. Everyone deals with something. Oh, okay.
It's so true. It's sad, but
Wow.
we shouldn't feel that way, but we do often because you feel alone in the moment and you're not looking to feel less alone, but there's nothing better than when you do. So thank goodness that most of us hopefully someone will care enough to step in.
Absolutely. Well, to everyone out there listening, please show Megan some love. Follow her. So go to at USA Icon Mrs. Arkansas. And of course, you can go to the Megan Wells, right? Let her know
And the
how
Megan West.
Yes. Let her know how her story impacted you.
Yes, please.
Absolutely. And if this episode spoke to you in any way, share it with someone who you think or might need some help to know that healing is possible and that our scars really do not disqualify us. They actually qualify us to lead with compassion. So until next time, stay strong. And as always, stay beautifully unscripted. Thank you, Megan.
Thank you.
If this episode spoke to you, if it sparked a thought, a feeling, or a shift, I invite you to subscribe to my channel so you don't miss an episode. Visit www.rosabelzohfeld.com. Here on Rosabel Unscripted, we dive deep into real stories, mindful moments, and conversations that matter. Every week, we explore themes like resilience, healing, transformation, and the courage to rewrite your own story. So if you're ready to grow, reflect, and walk this journey with an open heart, hit that subscribe button, give the video a like, and drop a comment. I'd love to hear your thoughts. Let's keep the conversation going. There are new episodes every week.